Unfortunately, not many people were convinced. When the school opened, they had just 3 students. Even so, my father insisted on starting the day in style by singing the national anthem. Then his nephew Aziz, who had come to help, raised the Pakistan flag. With so few students, they had little money to equip the school and soon ran out of credit. Neither man had any money from their families. Hidayatullah was not pleased to discover that my father was still in debt to lots of people from college, so they were always receiving letters demanding back the money. There was worse in store when my father went to register the school. After being made to wait for hours, he was finally ushered into the office of the official of schools, who sat behind towering piles of files surrounded by hangers-on drinking tea. "What kind of school is this?" asked the official, laughing at his application. "How many teachers do you have? 3? Your teachers are not trained. Everyone thinks they can open a school just like that." The other people in the office laughed along, ridiculing him. My father was angry. It was clear the official wanted money. Pashtuns cannot stand anyone belittling them. Nor was he about to pay a bribe for something he was entitled to. He and Hidayatullah hardly had money to pay for food, let alone bribes. The going rate for registration was about 13,000 rupees, more if they thought you were rich. And schools were expected to regularly entertain the officials for a good lunch of trout from the river or chicken. The education officer would call to arrange an inspection, then would give a detailed order for his lunch. My father used to grumble, "We're a school, not a poultry farm." So when the official angled for a bribe, my father turned on him with all the force of his years of debating. "Why are you asking all these questions?" he demanded. "Am I in an office or am I in a police station or a court? Am I a criminal?" He decided to challenge these officials and protect other school owners from such bullying and corruption. He knew that to do that, he needed some power of his own. He joined an organization called the SWAT Association of Private Schools. It was small in those days, just 15 members, and my father quickly became vice president. The other principals took paying bribes for granted, but my father argued that if all the schools joined together, they could resist. "Running a school is not a crime," he told them. "Why should you be paying bribes? You are not running brothels. You are educating children. Government officials are not your bosses," he reminded them. "They are your servants. They are taking salaries and have to serve you. You are the ones educating their children." My father soon became president of the organization and expanded it until it included 400 principals. Suddenly, the school owners were in a position of power. But my father has always been a romantic rather than a businessman. And in the meantime, he and Hidayatullah were in such desperate straits that they ran out of credit with the local shopkeeper and could not even buy tea or sugar. To try and boost their income, they ran a sweet shop at school, going off in the mornings and buying snacks to sell to the children. My father would buy maize and stay up late at night making and bagging popcorn. "I would get very depressed and sometimes collapse seeing the problems all around us," said Hidayatullah. "But when Ziauddin is in crisis, he becomes strong and his spirits high." My father insisted that they needed to think big. One day, Hidayatullah came back from trying to enroll pupils to find Ziauddin sitting in the office with the local head of Pakistan TV talking about advertising. As soon as the man had gone, Hidayatullah burst into laughter. "Ziauddin, we don't even have a TV," he pointed out. "If we advertise, we won't be able to watch it." But my father is an optimistic man and never deterred by practicalities. One day, my father told Hidayatullah he was going back to his village for a few days. He was getting married, but he had not told any of his friends in Mingora, as he could not afford to entertain them. Our weddings go on for several days of feasting. In fact, my mother often reminds my father he was not there for the actual ceremony. He was only there for the last day, when family members held a Quran and a shawl over their heads and held a mirror for them to look into. For many couples in arranged marriages, this would be the first time they see each other's faces. A small boy was brought to sit in their laps to encourage the birth of a son. It is our tradition for the bride to receive furniture or perhaps a fridge from her family and some gold from the groom's family. My grandfather would not buy enough gold, so my father had to borrow more money to buy bangles. After the wedding, my mother moved in with my grandfather and my uncle. My father returned to the village every 2 or 3 weeks to see her. The plan was to get his school going, then once it was successful, send for his wife. But his father kept complaining about the drain on his income and made my mother's life miserable. She had a little money of her own, so they used it to hire a van, and she moved to Mingora. They had no idea how they would manage. We just knew my father didn't want us there, said my father. At that time, I was unhappy with my family, but later I was grateful as it made me more independent. He had, however, neglected to tell his partner. Hidayatullah was horrified when my father returned to Mingora with a wife. We're not in a position to support a family, he told my father. Where will she live? It's okay, replied my father. She will cook and wash for us. My mother was excited to move to Mingora. To her, it was a modern town. When she and her friends had discussed their dreams as young girls by the river, most had just said they wanted to marry and have children and cook for their husbands. When it was my mother's turn, she said, I want to live in the city and be able to send out for kebabs and naan instead of cooking it myself. However, life wasn't quite what she expected. The shack had just 2 rooms. One where Hidayatullah and my father slept together, and one which was a small office. There was no kitchen, no plumbing. When my mother arrived, Hidayatullah had to move to the office and sleep on a hard wooden chair. My father consulted my mother on everything. Pekai, help me. My father consulted my mother on everything. Pekai, help me resolve my confusion on this, he would say. She even helped whitewash the school walls, holding up the lanterns so they could paint when the light went off in power cuts. Ziauddin was a family man and they were unusually close, said Hidayatullah. While most of us can't live with our wives, he couldn't be without his. Within a few months, my mother was expecting. Their first child, born in 1995, was a girl and stillborn. I think there was some problem with hygiene in that muddy place, says my father. I assumed women could give birth without going to hospital, as my mother and my sisters had in the village. My mother gave birth to 10 children in this way. The school continued to lose money. Months would pass, and they could not pay the teachers' wages or the school rent. The goldsmith kept coming and demanding his money for my mother's wedding bangles. My father would make him good tea and offer him biscuits in the hope that would keep him satisfied. Hidayatullah laughed. You think he will be happy with tea? He wants his money. The situation became so dire that my father was forced to sell the gold bangles. In our culture, wedding jewelry is a bond between the couple. Often, women sell their jewelry to help set up their husbands in business or to pay their fares to go abroad. My mother had already offered her bangles to pay for my father's nephew to go to college, which my father had rashly promised to fund. Fortunately, my father's cousin, Yahan Sher Khan, had stepped in. She did not realize the bangles were only partly paid for and was furious when she learned that my father did not get a good price for them. Just when it seemed matters could not get worse, the area was hit by flash floods. There had been torrential rain all day, and in the late afternoon, there was a warning of flooding. Everyone needed to leave the district. My mother was away, and Hidayatullah needed my father to help him move everything up to the first floor, safe from the fast-rising waters, but he couldn't find him anywhere. He went outside shouting, Ziauddin! Ziauddin! The search almost cost Hidayatullah his life. The narrow street near the school was totally flooded, and he was soon up to his neck in water. There were live electric cables hanging and swaying in the wind. He watched, paralyzed with fear, as they almost touched the water. Had they done so, he would have been electrocuted. When he finally found my father, he learned that he had heard a woman crying that her husband was trapped in their house, and he had rushed in to save him. Then he helped them save their fridge. Hidayatullah was furious. "You saved this woman's husband, but not your own house," he said. "Was it because of the cry of a woman?